everyone. Welcome to tonight's Artist Loft class. This is a two-part class on painting a mixed media teacup. Very fall-inspired image here, and I'm excited to see a lot of new faces in the crowd, as well as some of my dedicated regulars. So since it is a two-part class, it seems like we've got a lot of time, but we also are trying to squeeze a lot into 2 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to switch to my tabletop view and go over supplies. So before I forget, if you want to follow me on Instagram or tag your work that you make from tonight's class, hopefully we're all going to have some really fun products as a result from the class, but no pressure as well. Tag your work with those hashtags, Make It With Michael's or Michael's Classes, and you can follow me at Adrienne Hodge Art on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, Adrienne Hodge Fine Art, and there's a couple of my business cards with some of my serial skyscapes there. Oh my goodness, it's raining in Austin, Texas. Haven't had any rain in a while. It's worth mentioning. I also have the teacup itself filled with some dried flowers here. So I thought that was fun to have off screen, but I'm gonna have to move it because it's gonna be in my way. You should have this reference photo included in the supply list. So this is the reference photo that we will be working from. And if you weren't able to print that out, or if you're watching later on YouTube, it should be there included in the supply list for you to print. I'm going to be using the 9 by 12 inch watercolor pad, Artist Loft watercolor pad. We've got the sketching pencils. We've got the Artist Loft watercolor brushes. I believe the 8-piece is what I had on the supply list. We're going to be using the Artist Loft illustration pens. You're going to want a roll of painter's tape, a couple of water glasses, or at least one water glass, some plastic mixing trays, paper towels. Oh, can't forget the 36-piece watercolor paint, Artist Loft 36-piece watercolor paint set. Got an Artist Loft synthetic eraser, which should come in the sketching set that was listed, and then a Artist Loft sketch pad or drawing pad. And I believe that is everything. Okay. So I did a wonderful thing and misplaced my final product here. So here's a printout of the example image that you probably saw and drew you to the class, or maybe you saw this one with the paint brushes on the side of it. So this is just motivation for us to hurry up and get another final product like this, or for me anyway. We'll definitely have one of my examples by the end of the class, or maybe by part 2, I will find it. I think what happened is actually a good tip for you all. We're going to be taping this paper down to the desk, and as we work, the paper will often buckle because of the amount of water that we're going to be putting on it. And so after you're done and we've peeled the tape off, and your painting is finished, it can sometimes be a little curled at the edges or just still be a little buckled. So you can spritz it on the back with some water and then put it underneath a stack of books to help it flatten out. And I believe that is what I did with this. And I just need to search through my book stacks and find where it's hiding. But there it is. And I'm going to set that off to the side, and I'm sure that's not the last time I'll refer back to it. By the end of tonight's class, we should maybe have something that looks like what was on the advertisement for part 1 of the class, which just showed the sketch. We hopefully will get a little further than that though. I hope to have at least a couple of early layers of paint going here. I don't want to leave all the paint to part 2 of the class, but sometimes just getting it all sketched out and talking about that process can take up a lot of time. I also want to talk about mixing and matching some of the colors that we're seeing in this lovely teacup. Okay, so any questions about supplies before we dive in here?
I'm not seeing any so far.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and set my teacup aside. My grandmother gave my mom this teacup and it says January on it because my mom's birthday is in January, and then she gave it to me because that's how we roll in my family. We just give things away that are sentimental to us. So it's a January teacup, but we're calling it a fall teacup since it's got fall colors. And if you guys could pardon me for one moment, I am going to plug in my charger to my laptop because I realized I did not do that, and that would be a terrible thing if I lost power in the middle of the class once I get distracted. While you wait for me to do that, where is everybody coming from? You can drop it in the chat. I am in Austin, Texas, where I just said we're getting a tiny bit of rain here. I see Katzen says Baltimore. Got Scottsdale, Arizona, New Jersey, Oklahoma City.
Let's see, we've got a few from North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina. We've got California. We have Dallas. We have Ohio. We have Conover, North Carolina. We have St. Louis, Jacksonville. All over.
Okay. I had
New
to
Jersey.
sacrifice my light to plug in my charger. So sorry, y'all. I'm getting my longer charger here. I whispered to my partner to grab it for me. He grabbed me the short one. Okay. The joys of virtual teaching. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is tape down our paper to the surface of the table. In the final product here, you can see I've got this nice clean edge all the way around the sides of my piece here. And that is just a nice way to quickly elevate any work of art that you make using mixed media or watercolor. By just taping down the edge, you get a nice natural frame on it whenever you're done. And yeah, it just elevates it, gives it a little something extra. Sometimes even if it's not that amazing of a painting, having that little clean edge around it just really makes it better. Okay, so let me try to line up everything here. So we're going to take our tape and sort of hover over the edge of our paper. You can grab a pencil and a ruler if you're, really wanting to be exact. I'm going to go a little off screen here so I can get it centered on the table, but all I'm doing is just hovering half on and half off the edge of the paper. So I'm using the tape to help me measure and make a clean straight line. but it also doesn't matter if your line is not perfectly straight, because sometimes that happens when you do it this way. It won't be a perfectly straight line, but oftentimes that doesn't, it goes very unnoticed. But like I said, if you want to make an exact perfectly straight line, you can grab a ruler and measure maybe a 1/4 of an inch around every corner of the page and make sure that you're lining up your tape perfectly straight on all sides. So I'm just going to do that on all 4 sides of the paper. And once you do this, it will be stuck to that table surface. So one way to make it, if you're working in a temporary space, like at your kitchen table, and you're going to need to move it, if you happen to have a piece of masonite board, or maybe even a nice, even, clean piece of cardboard, you could tape it down to something like that. Although the cardboard wouldn't be as preferable as the masonite board. Or you can put an extra piece of tape on the side of this piece of tape. That way it kind of reinforces it. And whenever you need to move it in between this week and next week, it'll be easy to peel it up and then put it back. If there's just one piece of tape, it might not re-stick. But if you double up, it should be easy to re-stick it to the surface, because I know a lot of folks work at their kitchen tables, and even though I've got a dedicated space here, there's a likelihood I'm going to want to work on something else between this week and next week. So if it's the same thing for you, then that's another reason to double side your tape. Okay. So this next bit is something that's going to go pretty quickly for me, but may not go so quickly for you. And we're going to sketch it out on the final paper here. This is why you might want to have your sketching pad right now and maybe sketch it on the sketching pad at first. If you feel super confident in your sketching abilities to just follow along and sketch it on the final paper with me, by all means, do that, but make sure that you are using a very light pencil. So using an H pencil, a pencil that has like a 3H or a 2H or a 4H or a 5H in that sketching set. And if you're unfamiliar with what the numbers and letters on the side of the pencils mean, you can check out the first class in this series. It was called Intro to Graphite and Drawing Forms, and that will address just the optimal ways to use the pencil to draw lines that are easy to erase, and also making forms look 3-dimensional. I also have a class on perspective drawing of a coffee mug, and our lovely moderator can drop the links to both of those classes in the chat for you all to save and check out later. Or maybe if you're watching later on YouTube, go and check those out before this one. Definitely, if you struggle with the sketching of the teacup itself and making it look in perspective, the perspective drawing of a coffee mug will be extremely helpful, because I talk about the differences in the contours of viewing a coffee mug, which is extremely similar to this teacup, a cylindrical shape like this, from above, from below, and centered on a person's eye line. So there's 3 different drawings that we run through in that class. One where we're looking at a coffee mug from below, one where we're looking at it where our eye line is dead center on the coffee mug, and then one where we're looking at it from above. So I'm going to use this other empty teacup I have right here just to kind of show you the difference. So this would be, according to my camera, head on, right? Your eye level is centered in the center of this teacup. And then if I turn it this way, you're looking at it from above. And if I turn it this way, you're looking at it from below. So the contours are shifting according to that view. So just tell me in the chat, where is our eye line in this photograph? Is our eye line above, below, or centered on this view of the teacup in the photograph? The reference that I provided. Above, yes, several people answered. Okay, great. So knowing that is, you know, half the battle. Drawing it is quite another, right? So check out that class if you struggle with following along with capturing the perspective here. I'm definitely going to talk about the contours as I sketch it, and I might even grab my sketch pad and further illustrate some of those things. And that's why I said, you know, I would love for us to get some early stages of the watercolor on this tonight, but if all we have by the end of the class is just a nice detailed sketch and we're ready to add paint, I think we're still in a good spot, because I want to make sure that everyone is trucking along, following along in this example, and also that you can apply the skills that we're using in this class to another subject, to your own references. I try to always teach in a way that translates to other similar subject matter, so that we're not just, you know, following along step by step and we're not actually learning anything, right? So the learning part takes a little extra time. I'm not going to use an H pencil to sketch. I'm going to use a 4B pencil, and that is only so that, for one reason alone, and that is so that you can see my lines on the Zoom. If I were drawing by myself in my studio, and I wasn't teaching a class right now, I would not be using a 4B pencil, because the lines would be they're going to be really dark. They're going to be harder to erase. If I make a mistake, it's going to be more challenging. But I've just learned from experience that if I use the pencil that I want you to be using, then you just won't see my lines. So it's worth it for me to sacrifice those issues that I'm going to have with it so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to have my reference photo right here. And I just want to point out the perspective in the image a little bit more, and also the composition, and think about where the placement of the teacup is in regards to our frame. So we kind of created a frame with the tape here. And I'm not going to go too far into the rule of thirds, but basically the rule of thirds says when we divide a photograph into thirds on the horizontal and on the vertical, that our eyes will be drawn to the areas where those points intersect. So that would be in this photo right here, where the teacup handle is, would be where those lines might intersect. Right here where the leaves are, even though they may not seem like the main focal point, having those leaves in the composition really pull it together. And then maybe the top edge, or where the tea bag is another focal point, and like this big shadow is another focal point. So even though it seems like the teacup is right dead center in the center of the image, there's a lot of things in this composition that happen where those lines of thirds intersect that are interesting focal points. So we want to definitely make room for those leaves. And in this one, what I did was I just kind of shifted it down slightly so that it did put, you know, leave some room at the top for this wispy smoke. So either way, if you want to draw it exactly like it is in the photograph, or if you want to do what I'm going to do and leave some room at the top so that we can kind of make it our own a little bit with the wispy smoke, then that's what I'm doing. But you know, you're welcome to leave the wispy smoke out at the end as well, or the steam, not the smoke. Okay, so we're going to start with a big oval shape. for the top of our teacup. So I definitely am going to go very step by step here. I just also want to give you the tools to be able to apply this to another similar photograph if you want. I'm going to shift my view down slightly while I'm on this part of the sketch. Okay, so we've got a nice big oval shape. And then we want to go ahead and do another little half oval shape inside of it that sort of eclipses the first oval shape. And that's our liquid. So if I was using a very light pencil, I probably wouldn't even take the time to erase these lines that I don't want to be there, because I would be drawing so light that they wouldn't even matter. But since I'm using that 4B, there's just naturally going to be some lines I need to take out as I go along. And then we'll go ahead and put the tea bag in there, and I'm just guiding myself around by all of the forms that are touching each other and are in relationship to each other. This process may not be the way that everyone would want to approach it. You might want to just start drawing the whole teacup all at once, but I think it's easier to have some little reference points to go from. All right, and then I'm going to kind of use the reference of the shape of the tea bag. We're going kind of general to specific here as well. So I'm not putting any details in yet. I'm just getting the basic shapes going. And I feel like I maybe made that way too wide to start. You know what? I'm going to grab my sketch pad and do a little rough version of it real quick just to help me along. Help you guys too. Do a very general one. All right, so we've got the oval shape. We've got our kind of upside down trapezoid shape. Got the liquid inside. Just gonna try to do a really rough sketch real quick here. We've got a little question mark, half a heart shape right there for the handle. Okay, and then it's very narrow at this base. Really use the shadows here to help me find the shape of the base. So I've got this shadow along the bottom of the base that wraps around.
Adrian, somebody asks, if you don't have an H pencil, is it better to use a 4B or 6B?
Your only options are 4B or 6B. I guess a 4B, try to find as light of a pencil as you can. Maybe if you even have a number 2 pencil, that's an HB pencil. I would use that over a B pencil. I know I'm using a B, but you're going to have some really dark lines that are going to be hard to erase. It definitely makes it more of a struggle here for me. Like I said, the only reason I'm doing it is because if I didn't, you wouldn't be able to see my lines. Although maybe I should switch to a lighter B, go a little easier on myself. Grab a regular B pencil. So yeah, a number 2 pencil would be better. if you had it. But if not, then yeah, whatever you have, choose the lightest one, which would be the 4B out of those two options. Okay, we want to be able to see some of this plate through the teacup handle. So I'm just looking to see that I'm lining all those things up in the right way, and I did not do it. So I'm going to sketch it one more time really quick. Get as close to this perspective as we're seeing here. So oval. Sometimes it's good when the instructor struggles a tiny bit because then it makes everyone else feel okay. All right, there it is. I feel like I got that little teacup shape to happen a little better there. I'm going to capture the emotion of this little teacup, right? Capture the cuteness of it. Okay. And we've got like a dog bowl shape underneath, right? Looking at this shape, and then that shadow really helps there. There's this shadow across it. Go ahead and put my this little gold lining that happens around the center. Here, there's a little frame, and that goes into the just at the bottom of where it's narrow. So I'm just trying to make all those things line up in relationship to each other and also capture the same sort of, you know, get the symmetry, but it's not very symmetrical. The oblong stretched out oval shape is consistent throughout all of these. So if you're trying to do a circle, if you're trying to force a circle onto this, it's not going to happen. We want to get this plate to be visible through the handle. We want to really push that kind of disc-like feeling to the plate. And I think I made it too round on this one again, but I'm getting closer. The way we put the leaves in are really going to help create the contours. So I want to talk about the contours really briefly here. This is, I can't ever help myself. This is what the perspective drawing class really goes into, is how there's a line of symmetry on the vertical here when we're looking at this on the vertical axis. And if everything I'm saying is like, what is she talking about? Go check out that class. It was linked in the description of this class for a reason, because I know the perspective is so tricky here. But there's a line of symmetry on the vertical axis when we're looking at this way. And then out from the center where it's equal, it radiates out to the left on the left side, and it radiates out in a curve to the right on the right side. And then the horizontal axis are contours to this. They curve upward. Everything is curved upward because we're looking at it from above. If we were looking at it from below, or I'm sorry, they're curved down, depending on how you look at it. Yeah, it's curved down. They're curved down. The curve is pointing down. The curve is following the same curve as the base of the cup. So we're looking at it from above, so we're looking down. If we were looking at it from below and looking up, that curve would be upward. Sorry, I said it backwards, but I was speaking and thinking backwards there. Okay, so now everything looks to be lining up, but the way that I'm going to make sure that my saucer is doing what it needs to do is we want to be able to radiate out like we would a sundial right here. We want these lines, and then we want there to be a slight curve up too at the edge. Also, I'm kind of going off the bottom of my paper here with this sketch, so if it seems like my sketch is disappearing, it's because it is. And this is just a rough sketch to help us with the contours. I knew diving in on that final paper was going to be a stretch. I always have to sketch things first. Okay, so I thought maybe including that reference class, like maybe I could just go for it, but I needed a rough sketch too, and I'm sure you guys do as well. Okay, so we've got something like that. And then same thing with the liquid. Even though the liquid seems like it's flat, think about the surface of the liquid doing this. So being kind of flat, but then it's also three-dimensional. So we're thinking about this sort of contour on the flat surface of the liquid. And then the inner edge of the teacup, we're looking at something like this. And the perspective of the coffee mug class goes into this in so much more depth. So I'm just going to quickly sketch it in. And then I want to sketch it in on the handle as well. And then I'll go back to my final drawing one more time. So on the handle, we're seeing it from multiple angles here. This sometimes is hard for people's brains to wrap around, but just, slow down and look at it and notice that you're seeing an edge kind of curve right here. And then you're seeing the top of the handle here at the top. And then you're seeing mostly the side of it on the side. So notice what all of the contours are doing. All right, so now let me go to back to my final one and see if I can make it happen. And you really don't want, if you're like sketching on your final paper and you're erasing a whole bunch and you've got a lot of dark lines and you've been kind of pressing into the pencil and you've created grooves in the top of your paper, I would maybe just grab a different piece of paper. And since we're still in this early stage, if you were, doing your sketching practice on the final paper instead of in your sketchbook, I would maybe grab another sheet of watercolor paper to do the sketch, just because when we start adding the watercolor, sometimes those ghost lines can come back and haunt us. If that was happening, that's the other reason to check out that first class on Intro to Graphite, because it talks about using your pencil very lightly and, avoiding carving into the surface of the paper. And now I'm realizing I maybe went down a little too far on this paper, leaving too much room for the smoke at the beginning. Oh my goodness. I'm not going to be able to squeeze the leaf in there. Moving it up, y'all. Up slightly. I'm going to put the oval at the center. Hopefully my ghost lines are not going to haunt me. Because we want to be able to at least put those two leaves in there. Okay, also for the final sketch here, we really don't need a whole lot of detail. If you like, we don't really need a lot of detail on the leaves. We don't need a lot of detail on anything because we're going to be painting it. So we really just need like a rough guide, make sure that everything's lining up. You want to make sure your shadows are lining up where you want them, your shadowy shapes. And maybe you might put, or I'm going to do it here in just a minute, I might sketch in a little bit of the flower motif on the, but I'm not going to put a lot of detail on that. We're going to let our watercolor do all the work with that. In fact, when I'm done sketching this, I might take my eraser over the top of it and erase out a lot of these darker lines so that all I have is just very minimal pencil on the page. And this saucer really is going to take up a lot of space in the drawing, and it might feel kind of wonky at first. But once we put, the leaves on there, that motif on there, we're going to make sure we're following the contours that I just outlined in that other sketch. So it's not going to feel so flat. I know it feels kind of flat at this point, but really just, try to make sure you're getting that disc-like feeling to happen. We don't want it to be perfectly round. We want it to feel sort of stretched out. Okay. I like how I started with the liquid on the other sketch, and then now this is the last thing I'm putting in here. The tea bag is kind of slouching. It's not perfectly straight here. Okay, now let's sketch in some of these shadowy shapes, because that's what's going to really guide us around when we start adding the watercolor. So we want this shadowy shape that's following the contours of the form, what we're seeing right here. Just outline that shadow. So something like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. We just want it to hug the inside, those contours that we outlined just a moment ago. Same thing with this shadow right here. We want to hug the contours of that handle. You might put that shape of that gold in there. There is gold in this 36 piece watercolor set, which is fun to add, but I'm not gonna push it too hard because I think our gold and yellow colors we're gonna use are gonna be strong enough to make that come across. There is a little bit of a squared off thing happening here, but I'm not going to push that too much. So if you want to keep it rounded and not worry about that too much, I think that's fine. Doesn't show up a lot in the photograph. Okay, and then here's where we've got a lot of hugging the curves happening, and I realized I left that off in my contour sketch here, but it looks like this on the dog bowl shape. So it sort of radiates out on the vertical. This base, actually, we are, yeah, no, sorry, it's the same. We're still looking down. Still curving down. I don't know why my brain keeps wanting to say it's curving up right there. So we want to make sure that our contours are doing the same thing. So the vertical lines that we're seeing are going to follow those lines that I just outlined. They're not going to curve in the same direction on the left as they do on the right. Over here, it's going to hug this curve. Over here, it's going to hug this curve. And that's the difference between making it look flat and making it look three-dimensional. Okay, so yeah, remember that the surface of our water would be flat there, but we really don't have any shadows happening on the surface of the water, but we can see the tea bag underneath there. So it does sort of break up the texture there, but we're going to try to make it feel like it's underneath. We're looking at the contours of the tea bag, not the contours of the water. It's separate. So it can get a little complicated, but we can do it. We just have to separate our perception of three-dimensional forms piece by piece. All right, so now with these flowers, again, we're hugging the contours of the form. In the perspective of a coffee mug class, I take a moment to illustrate this by sketching a word across one of my sketches of the coffee mug, and I show how the word would not be flat across it. Like if I just drew this flower shape sort of flat on the surface and I didn't account for all of these little curves that I just outlined, then it could feel very flat. So just make sure you're noticing where it's kind of getting a little stretched out and curved because of the point of view of the viewer. And the easy way to interpret that without getting into perspective too deeply is to just really look at it. Just draw it exactly like you're seeing it. Don't try to draw your imagined version of it. Like you want to have that reference photo right next to you, like I do right now, and sketch it from what you're observing. So my eyes are darting back and forth between the reference photo and my drawing, and I'm just putting the very baseline sketch of this flower motif. Because when we get to the watercolor, we're going to kind of splash it in. But just having this understanding of the contours is going to enable us to splash it in a way that feels three-dimensional. All right, I'm probably taking a little too much time with these flowers than I should, but I'm just going to kind of scribble in there. Okay, and then now I didn't really quite leave as much room as I wanted for that leaf down there, but I'm going to still put it in because I want to get at least some of that strong shadow, because that strong shadow next to it is so interesting. But actually, I got to put the shadow under the teacup first. I'm going to end up editing that out, y'all. There's no way. I'm starting over. I'm going to sketch it off to the side for those of you who left enough room for the leaf. I was getting a little self-conscious about the time, so after all that talk about how important the leaf was to the composition, I'm cropping it out, but I'm gonna at least put this leaf in here. So that leaf really adds something to the, because we're gonna put that really strong contrasty shadow underneath it. And that shadow in the painting, right, it just makes such a huge difference to like give it weight and depth and make it feel three-dimensional. So hopefully you left some room for that leaf, because I really like that leaf. But I'm just gonna sketch this leaf over here. And at least got one of them in there. And then I can put my rose in off to the side. So when you sketch the leaf, make sure you make room for that big sharp shadow. And the shadow gets kind of broken up in a few places. And then for the rose on the side here, we're gonna just look at the main shadows of the rose. And when our moderator was asking me, did I have any other classes I might reference? I'm always like, no, I think that's it. And then I always remember one more because I've been teaching these classes for almost a year and a half now. So there's a lot of classes, but there was a couple of classes on flower fundamentals and sketching a rose. So you might check those out. If you search Artist Loft Flower Fundamentals and Rose, they should come up quite easily. Okay, so I kind of squeezed my rose in over here in a spot where it isn't actually in the photograph, but it's in there, and I got one leaf. And if you're sketching this leaf, just remember those contours again. So if you've got room for it in yours, really pay attention to the contours of the leaf, how it curves down and back up, and how the shadows hug those curves. And then we want that shadow to feel nice and flat on the surface. So we've got a flat shadow, which we're going to do with our watercolor later, but I still just want to illustrate it. And then with the contours, noticing where they dip and curve on that leaf. Maybe like a wave. Really get those three-dimensional things going. Okay, ready to add a wash here. We're landing exactly where I expected we would. All right, so the way we want to build up our watercolor is to start with the background and work our way forward. And we're going to start with the background, which was a piece of brown paper that I set up before I took this photograph. So we're going to use a couple of different colors to make this brown background, and we're going to kind of try to make this like vintage, you know, kind of sepia thing happen. So we're going to use a few different colors here. So we're going to use the burnt sienna.
Adrian, really quick, did you erase the contour lines before you started painting?
I did not put them on the final sketch. I only put them on my my sketch in my sketch pad. So those, I didn't put those in the final sketch. But yes, if you sketched them, then yeah, you want to erase those before you start painting, because they will, all of these pencil lines will show through with our watercolor. In fact, I said I was going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do it now because I think everybody's seen the way I've sketched it, and you can always, you know, rewind the video. You'll get a, you can watch the playback later. I'm just going to take my eraser on its side now and just go like this, because really drawing those lines so dark was only so you guys could see them. I don't want them that dark. And they're just going to distract from the watercolor. So I'm going to erase especially some of those darker lines. I just want to be able to see the, you know, the faint. I just want the help of those lines, but I really don't need them. And especially some of the lighter colors we're going to use with the watercolor, they'll mix in with the pencil and make it a little muddy. And yeah, and we want to do kind of an implied line thing here. We want to leave it a little blank, and then we're going to use our illustration pens at the end to add some little nuance. So it's kind of nice if it kind of disappears onto the page right there, and we're really seeing more of an implied, you know, we're seeing a line that's implied here. This is actually an earlier stage of the painting. This is before I added the illustration pens. Okay, so let's make that background color. So we've got the burnt sienna, and then we've got the yellow ochre. And then I think that will be good. I'm going to take a brush. I'm going to mix those two colors together. And if your color is a little darker or a little lighter than mine, you know, embrace individuality here. We don't need all of our teacup paintings to look identical, or if you wanted to change it in some other way. I'm not going to worry about mixing and matching colors perfectly. We're all going to get somewhere in the same family here. So I've got the yellow ochre with that burnt sienna. And then I'm going to water that down. So I'm just going to take my water cup and just drip water into that color. There is a local artist here in Austin, teaching artist Jenny Granberry. She has a YouTube channel that you might check out. She does a lot of amazing watercolor tutorials, and I actually have a day job now working for Meta, and I brought her in as a teaching artist for the Meta internal community to teach a watercolor class last week, and she had a really cool analogy that I was like, I'm going to use, but I got to make sure I credit her for this. She said, because she's always telling students to use more water with watercolor, and she said, think about with a piece of toast with butter, you're like kind of scraping the butter on, but when you're putting cream cheese on a bagel, you're just slathering it on, right? So that's what we want to do with watercolor. We want to slather the water in there. And actually, I'm going to do a little wet on wet wash here for the background, and that'll zip us along here and make some fun progress for the end of the class. So I'm going to take my flat brush and I'm just going to paint just water across the whole background. I'm going to keep it nice and consistent with vertical lines. I'm just painting water directly onto the page. And be careful to go around the edge of my teacup here. Get this little corner down here and all around the edge. I'm just kind of painting a little bubble around my leaves and stuff. We can always get a little more defined around those next week. Okay, and then I'm going to take that same flat brush and start painting my wash. And I'm going to try to let it be a little darker around the edge of the paper, around the corner of the paper. And just really, slather it on there. Let it bleed. So the trick with watercolor is to not paint it like you would when you're painting a wall. When you're painting a wall, you kind of go over it, you go over it again, you go back over it. Watercolor is not house paint. It's not acrylic paint. It's not oil paint. It doesn't need a whole lot of action done onto it for it to do its thing. You can just put it on there and let it kind of flow and be fluid and bleed around. And if you really want to keep adding another layer, like you're like, oh, it's not dark enough, I want it to be darker, wait for it to dry. And you want to wait for it to dry for two reasons. One, it's going to look different when it's dry. So you want to wait for that first layer to dry to see if you actually do want to make it darker, because you might not. You might see it dry and say, no, actually, that's good. I like it like that. And the other reason is because it's not going to work out the way you think it's going to. It's not going to, because it's not all those other types of paint that I listed. It's not going to behave the same way. And eventually what's going to happen if you keep adding onto it when it's wet like this is it's just going to make the paper buckle a whole bunch. and it's gonna make, maybe even make the paper start to pill, like little pieces of it will start to peel up. So just do this nice flat wash and then let it dry. And this is why I said optional was the hair dryer. I don't really like using hair dryers on watercolor because I like the natural way that it dries. And sometimes the hair dryer can blow it around and make the natural, little fun moments that happen when you let it dry organically go away. So that's the reason I don't like to use a hair dryer, but I put it on the supply list because especially next week, as we really get into this, I was afraid that things might be wet and then, we needed to get to the next layer. And so using a hair dryer might be the only way to do that. That's a pretty good place to land for the end of part one. These two-part classes, when I have these finished products, are always so ambitious, and it's always feels a little daunting to like squeeze it all in, but I'm pretty happy with where we landed on this one. I'm going to just let this dry naturally. I'm not going to touch it again. And next week, we'll just keep layering in our teacup flowers, and we'll probably put another layer on this background so we can get that fun vintage sepia antique vignette to happen around the edge of the paper. And feel free to post your process photos so far. And then I'd love to see if anybody wants to share theirs right now. I know we taped them down to the paper or down to our table's top surfaces, but if yours is easy to hold up, we can spotlight you and see. Oh, very nice, Sarah. Like that background so far. Oh yes, off to a good start. I like that there's a physical teacup on the table next to somebody else's there. It's helpful to have a reference. I saw somebody ask, do I need to register for part two? Yeah, you'll want to register for part two. It's going to be the same time next Wednesday. We've got a new person spotlighted. Do you want to hold it up? All right, nice and light. I love it. It's so light that I can't see it, but that's great. Ooh, look at that. That's a very strong teacup drawing. Maybe take that eraser to the top of it and just take off that top layer of graphite before you go into your watercolor so the watercolor doesn't make your graphite bleed. That's a really strong drawing. I like that colored tape too. It's fun. Let me spotlight somebody else. Oh yes, off to a good start. Yeah, you could go ahead and wash over the whole thing too. I see you kind of went onto the teacup. That's definitely an option. But then some of the whiter highlights on the teacup, we can go back in with the white in the set, but it may not pull it back out. But there's other options, white gouache or white ink. Ooh, yes, that looks really nice. Very clean. Flat wash in the background. Oh, and you turned your paper landscape. That's makes a nice composition. I see Kristen said she did wash the whole thing. I didn't catch the whole comment. The chat's very busy. Oh, look at that. That's very nice too. Oh, I like how you didn't use the tape, but you still did a nice frame. That's how I like to do a lot of my paintings, kind of an uneven blank edge. So much lovely positive feedback. Thank you all. Very nice. Yeah, nothing wrong with developing that sketch first. And I like that you're adding some pen to it, getting real comfortable with the image before you work on the painting. That's a great strategy. Well, I wish we could look at everyone's. Thank you all for joining me. I'm really excited about these. They're off to such a wonderful start. And yeah, we've got a full hour next week and we'll just dive in and start splashing in our other colors on the teacup. and I'll see you then. Have a good night.